Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today. I just wanted to get it started so that we could start letting people in. I will give it a minute or so and wait for any more joiners to arrive. So just bear with us. Okay, we'll give it 30 more seconds and then we will get started because we do have a lot to cover today, unsurprisingly. Welcome, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I can see more people coming in, which is fantastic. We will get started in just imminently. Just want to let people arrive and get settled. Thank you so much for coming. I can see lots of people joining now. So I think we'll get started. That's okay. So welcome everybody to our webinar on navigating the employee landscape. We do have a lot to cover today. We'll be talking all things legal reforms, worker expectations, operational business requirements, and how you somehow find that magic balance between all three of those things. We decided that we really wanted to put this webinar on at the back end of last year. We run an annual survey for HR and recruitment and business leaders, and actually the kind of the huge tranche of reforms that were coming in was clearly an area of kind of focus, concern, dare I say it, for the year ahead for 2025. So I thought it was really important to cover this topic off because there is an awful lot going on, and yeah, we have a lot to share with you today. So thank you so much for joining. Just to confirm, all microphones, videos have been muted and switched off. But if you do have any questions at any point, do pop them into the Q&A facility and we'll pick them up. We have got about 30 minutes of content, give or take, and we do have about 15 minutes put aside at the end to answer any of the questions that you may have. I will be sharing our contact details on the screen a couple of times though. So if you do have any questions, and you'd rather pick it up offline, then obviously do please feel free to get in touch via email alternatively. So before we start, those of you that don't know Curve, I just want to flash this slide up quickly and let you know a little bit about who we are and what we do and why we're the right people to be covering this topic today. So we've actually been in operation for 21 years now, and we support organisations to design, develop, or even elevate their recruitment HR functions. We do this in a number of different ways, whether it's through analysis and audits, benchmarking, consultancy or delivery services, meaning that what we can do is provide expertise and support to organisations across the entire employee lifecycle. We are very proud of what we do, and over the years we've accumulated some great awards and accolades, and it's just a very small selection of some of the awards that we have won here. We've got lots of lovely shiny sparkly awards dotted around the office, so should you ever come to visit you'll be able to see those in person. So I am Sam Pusey. I am hosting the webinar for you today. I head up the Insights Employer Brand and Marketing team, but I'm very pleased to say that I am joined by the experts on this topic. So good morning to Kat and good morning to Anna. Kat heads up our internal HR and our legal functions, and Anna heads up our consultancy side of the business. And both of you are very, very busy at the moment, supporting a whole myriad of customers through all of these legal reforms and operational balances. So that's exactly why I wanted to get you on today to share some of your insights and your findings. Before I hand over to Kat to kick off the webinar, I just wanted to let you know that what we're going to do is break the webinar down into 3 different sections today, because we do have a lot to cover. May have mentioned that, but what we'll start with is actually the legal reform. So what's going on, what's happened already, what's coming in the future, what the risks are and the actions that you should be taking right now and also to get prepared. What those worker expectations and those business requirements are will be covered by Anna. So this is where we kind of bring it into kind of operational reality and how you go and make those reforms active in your business while also keeping your employees happy and obviously making sure that your business can still function and run and you can still deliver to your customers. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Kat to kick off the webinar for us.
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to have you with us. I am, as Sam has said, kicking off with the legal reforms that we've got coming up. There's quite a lot to get through, so I will try and whiz through them as much as possible, but whilst giving you kind of the key details for each. And then obviously Anna will take you into the operational side and how you actually implement these. So to start with, we're going to focus on 6 of the kind of key changes coming up. I'm going to caveat all of this. At the moment, we don't have a date for any of these. So a lot of this looks like it's coming up in 2026. We don't have confirmed dates. They're saying autumn 2026, but a lot of the detail and obviously the dates are still to be confirmed. But this is going to really kind of give you a recap in terms of what do we know now. So we're going to cover unfair dismissal, so that's coming in and it's going to be a day 1 right. Extended time limits for employment tribunal claims. They're looking to double the time limit that's currently in place. They're looking to make changes around collective redundancy and consultation periods. Fire and rehire, so that's already had a bit of a kind of a change that we've seen recently with the kind of code of conduct coming through, but actually that's going to change again. 0 hour and low hour and agency workers are having a few changes as well, and a bit more kind of compliance in that area. And then also there's a lot of changes around trade unions coming up. So I want to focus on those first, and then I'll take you through a few more changes that we've also got to look at. So firstly, unfair dismissal rights. So at the moment, employees need 2 years length of service before they can bring a claim to a tribunal for unfair dismissal. That is looking to change. The proposal as it will change to become a day 1 right. So from the first day of employment, an employee will have a claim for unfair dismissal if they're unfairly dismissed from their job. This will be subject to an initial period. So this is looking at a light touch approach, similar to probably what a lot of companies do for their probationary periods at the moment. And the initial period is going to be between 3 and 9 months from the start date of employment, but that is to be confirmed, but that's kind of latest theories on what's going to happen. We're also awaiting confirmation on what that light touch approach actually does look like, but the first indications are that it's going to be consist of holding a meeting with the employee, obviously going through the concerns you've got with the employee and allowing them the right to be accompanied at that meeting. So like I said, actually, if you're following a good probation process at the moment, you're holding review meetings and you're actually holding a final meeting at the end and allowing an employee to be accompanied, you're actually in really good stead in terms of what this process could look like. And actually, it might just be minor tweaks that you need to make. The dismissal must be for conduct, capability, a statutory bar, or some other substantial reason which relates to the employee. And like I said, this isn't going to start until that employee has started employment. So if you've offered an employee but they haven't started, this doesn't kick in. Timelines, as I said, is looking like autumn 2026. So it will be next year that this comes in, but we're still waiting on kind of confirmed details for that. Moving on to the extension of the time limits for an employee to bring a tribunal claim. So currently, the time limit is 3 months from end of employment. They are looking to extend that to 6 months. So they're doubling the time frame. Obviously, this does extend the risk for an employer, but potentially it may allow for more issues, more concerns to be resolved outside of the tribunal process. By giving a lengthier time to make a claim, it might avoid those kind of triggers where employees just go, I need to make a claim and I'm going to make it, and then try and resolve things. So you never know the impact it may have, but obviously the risk is greater. We're then moving on to the redundancy consultation period. So where there's a collective consultation, potentially there's going to be a new threshold trigger applied, which will determine whether collective consultation will be triggered or not. Again, we're awaiting details on what that threshold may look like, but it could be a percentage of the total workforce. The original proposal that was put in last year was around removing the at one establishment wording within the proposal. That's actually been dropped. So that would have obviously widened massively the scope in terms of who you need to consider when you're looking to make redundancies, whether it's one site or multiple sites. But that's been dropped, but we are waiting to see what it's replaced with. They are looking to increase the penalty for breaching collective consultation requirements. So that will be doubling from 90 days to 180 days gross pay. So obviously the financial impact that that has if you don't follow a process is quite big. And they're also looking at potentially doubling the minimum time limit for consultations where an employer is proposing 100 or more. And that's going from 45 days to 90 days, but that's being consulted at the moment. So again, we'll wait and see whether that happens or not. So again, quite a few changes in that area. We're then moving on to fire and rehire practices. So we had a code of practice implemented last year, which obviously showed you the process that should be followed where fire and rehire for kind of a change of terms is taking place. The proposal is to actually make this an automatically unfair reason to dismiss. Where the reason is the employer sought to vary the employment contract and they did not agree, or to enable another person to be employed or the same employee to be re-employed under varied terms to carry out substantially the same duties as before. There will only be one exception to this, and that exception will be a statutory exception where the business is in financial difficulties, which at the time were affecting or were likely to immediately affect the employer's ability to carry on the business as a going concern. So that will be the one and only reason that you would be able to complete a fire and rehire exercise if your business was in financial difficulties. We're then moving on to kind of changes around 0 hours and low hour workers and also agency workers. So this is around giving them further rights in terms of hours offered. So where a low hour, an agency worker, a 0 hour worker is working hours over a set period, that period looks like the reference period is going to be about 12 weeks. But again, waiting on confirmation around that. Where they're working set hours in that period, they will then be given the right to be offered a set number of hours. There are also changes around changes to shifts and cancellation of shifts. So there will be notice periods that will need to be given if you're looking to change shifts or cancel any shifts. And where a shorter notice period is given, then there will be compensation due to the worker where their shifts are changed, cancelled, cut short. Again, we're waiting on details of what that compensation looks like, what a low worker is, how many hours would be guaranteed. So again, there's a lot of detail we're still waiting on confirmation for, but in general, they're the proposals which could have quite an impact on those businesses that use a lot of kind of your low hour worker or your 0 hour workers, and also agency workers. We've had confirmation that this will apply to agency workers as well. And then finally, we are looking at trade unions. So the idea is to simplify and make it easier to access a trade union at work. So things that are being proposed at the moment are a reduction in the notice needed for industrial action. So that'll be going from 14 days to 10 days. Majority voting will be used to recognise the trade union. And this is also going to include e-balloting, so to make it easier for people to vote. There will be a requirement for workers to be given a written statement advising them of the right to join a trade union, and that will need to be given at certain periods, but one of those periods will be at the same time you give an employee their written particulars, so their contract of employment. And then access agreements have been proposed in terms of allowing trade unions to enter qualifying trade unions, to enter businesses to allow meetings to happen, representation to happen, recruiting or organising of workers. It wouldn't allow for the planning of industrial action. So again, quite a few changes going on in that area as well. And then that's kind of 6 key areas. However, there are a raft of changes, and there's quite a few more that I'm just going to quite briefly touch on now, but they're all things that you need to keep an eye on as a business, as they will have an impact. So firstly, we've got the addition of umbrella company regulations and the movement of payment liability to agency or end client users. So there's been a lot of news and a lot of press in terms of compliance with umbrella companies, those rogue umbrella companies that are deviating from tax processes and obviously not paying the correct taxes. So they are moving these in line with more agency type processes. So where an umbrella company is used in the chain, where there's a contractor in place, for example, if there's an umbrella company in the chain, it will actually be the agency if they're in the process, or the end client if there is no agency in the process, that would be liable to ensure the correct tax is being paid. So the umbrella company would still be paying that tax and deducting that tax from the worker, but the liability for the correct tax would fall to the end client or the agency in that supply chain. There's going to be further protections for women during and after pregnancy against dismissal. So at the moment, there are protections against redundancies, but they are widening that and amending the existing statutory provisions to include other types of dismissal. Again, waiting on further information in terms of what that exactly will entail, but it's also likely to include other types of leave, such as adoption and shared parental leave. Statutory sick pay changes. So that was deemed to be imminent, but again, we don't have a date for this to kick in yet, but they will be making statutory sick pay kick in from day one. So at the moment, there's a 3-day waiting period and it kicks in from day 4. They're looking to get rid of the waiting period and also get rid of the lower earnings limit. So it will apply to lower earners. Obviously great for them. In terms of the rate, it will be at the prescribed statutory rate or 80% of the employee's weekly earnings, whichever is the lower. With all of this kind of legislation, obviously there is a lot to monitor. So they're looking to introduce a Fair Work agency, and this agency would have enforcement powers. So they will be covering things such as national minimum wage, statutory sick pay, holiday pay, employment tribunal penalties, and some aspects of the Modern Slavery Act. They'll have inspection and also enforcement powers, and would actually be able to issue fines or bring employment tribunals on behalf of employees, and potentially criminal proceedings as well. So again, something to keep an eye on. Next, flexible working. We've just had a load of changes to flexible working, but there's some more coming our way. So there's going to be some smaller amendments to the current provisions around flexible working, but this will really be around how you justify if you are declining a flexible working request. At the moment, there's 8 reasons that you can decline a flexible working request. They're staying the same, but you within your kind of written communications afterwards will really need to justify why it's a reasonable response from you that you're declining the flexible working request. So a bit more onus on the employer. We've got further amendments to the sexual harassment protections in place. So obviously in October, they came into force where employers have to take reasonable steps to protect their employees from sexual harassment. It's a step up from that. So the proposal is that employers will need to take all reasonable steps to protect their employees from sexual harassment in the workplace. Again, what that looks like, we're not sure yet, but it's hoped that actually the regulations will bring a bit more clarity in terms of what is expected of an employer and what those reasonable steps would look like. So we'll wait and see on that one. Family leave is having a bit of a change as well. So again, there's proposals to amend qualifying tenure for paternity and parental leave to make these day 1 rights. So at the moment, it's either 26 weeks for paternity leave or it's a year for unpaid parental leave. They will become day 1 rights. It's also going to look to remove the need to take paternity leave before shared parental leave. So at the moment, if you don't take it before shared parental leave, you lose the right for your paternity leave. They're looking to remove that. What will be staying though is the qualifying tenure for paternity pay. So you'll be entitled to the leave, but not necessarily the pay. And then finally, we've got the introduction of bereavement leave. So this is going to be unpaid leave. We're again awaiting details on kind of what qualifying relationships look like, what the minimum period would be, how long you've got to take the leave. But the proposals are that this will also include pregnancy loss before 24 weeks. So again, more details to follow on that, but it's furthering the kind of the family leave and the protections available to employees. So as you can see, there is a lot coming down the line in terms of employment law changes, and actually there's some there that I haven't even mentioned. So I tried to focus on the key ones, I think the key ones that will impact businesses, but there is a lot coming our way, and it's so important that we just try and keep up to date with all the changes and the confirmations as they come in. However, that's not the whole picture, is it? We all know there's other things that we've been trying to battle with as a business. Most recently, the NI increases that came into force in April this year. They've had a huge impact on businesses. I know a lot of smaller businesses that are really struggling. It's estimated to have cost UK businesses an extra 2% on their payroll costs. Obviously, we've also had national minimum wage increases in line with the annual increases. So there's been a lot of financial costs that businesses have had to battle with recently, and are still battling with to try and kind of get back to that status quo, get back to that place where they can actually make some investments. But it's not only financial costs. There's also been indirect costs with implementing all of these changes. So we've had the introduction of carers leave. We've already had amendments to paternity leave. We've had the business requirements around protections around sexual harassment. We've had the amendments to flexible working rights. We've had the introduction of neonatal care leave and pay, and that's just in the last year, and there's many more that I could mention. So again, you know, businesses have had to grapple with financial costs and also the admin burden of making all of these changes, making sure policies are up to date, implementing process changes where needed. So it's not been easy. It's not been an easy ride so far, and unfortunately there's more to come. So I suppose, you know, there is a lot of changes to come, as I've said, and actually, why should it matter? Why should we take an interest in this? Why are these reforms important, and what is the risk of getting it wrong? So as I've mentioned, there is one and two, there's financial risk. So we've got financial risk from tribunal claims. Obviously, that risk gets greater with these changes. The time limit is increasing to bring a claim to 6 months, and the qualifying service limits are being reduced. So it's a day one right. So logically, you would expect probably more claims. I'm not entirely sure how the tribunal system is going to cope with this, but obviously the risk is greater of getting a claim. So it's so important that you are up to date with your legal changes, you're up to date in what your processes need to be to keep you out of that risk area. However, we've also got then the financial risk from many enforcement agencies. So with the Fair Work Agency, they will have more power. They will have more power to fine, to bring criminal charges, to take cases to employment tribunal. So, you know, we have a risk from there as well. The monitoring will be more. It's not just financial risk though. We've got the reputational damage, and also then the damage to kind of your employee value proposition. So your external value proposition, how you attract candidates, but also employee engagement. You know, if you're not putting in some of these in place, if you're not following the right processes, in the end, it damages your employee engagement as well. They're not going to see you as a fair employee. I think it's so important now that you retain your staff, and you know, try and attract the best staff, and how you do that is obviously having the proper processes, following the legislation and keeping up to date with what you need to do. There's nothing worse than obviously having quite a vocal employee who might leave, who you know, damages that brand that you've worked so hard to achieve. So obviously, you know, use the resources, use external partners as and when you can, in order to just make sure you're doing what you need to do as a minimum. So in terms of looking at everything we've covered, all the changes that are taking place, what can you be doing now? I've said it multiple times, I've caveated this. We are waiting on a lot of detail to be confirmed. And obviously, as and when that does happen, you know, us and many other partners will be coming out to you to confirm those details. But is there anything you can be doing now to make sure that you're in the best place possible for when these changes do come in? So I think the first action that should be taken is to audit. What are your current policies and processes in place? What are you doing at the moment around probations? For example, do you have a good probation review structure in place and process in place? Have you actually, you're probably ticking the boxes in terms of the changes that are going to come up, if you've got a good solid process in place right now. what types of role make up your organisational structure? Do you use a lot of agency workers? Do you use a lot of low hour or 0 hour workers? What impact will that have moving forward when these changes do come in terms of what we know currently? So audit your current state. Where are you now, and how will these things impact you, and what do you need to take account of? Policy updates. So again, a lot of this can't be done until you know the details. However, we have had a raft of changes that have already come in. So we've had the amendments to flexible working. We have had the amendments to family leave. We've had the anti-harassment policies come in and those steps that you need to take. So make sure your current policies are up to date. Make sure they're in a really good place to then receive any further updates that you may need. Leadership training. Do your managers know your current policies, and do they know how to run those processes? Are they confident in running a probation review process? Do they understand the impact of not following that process currently, but then maybe do they understand the impact that potentially in the future that's going to have as well? Get them on board with these changes and make sure they're aware of what's coming up. Employee communications and then employee training go hand in hand. So obviously when you're updating your policies and your processes, updating your benefits, updating what you can offer, make sure you're communicating that to your employees and also training them where needed. So obviously the anti-harassment, the protection against sexual harassment, that involves you probably training your employees on what that means. How do they report any sexual harassment that they've seen or been, unfortunately, the kind of end of, like what do they need to do to report that? So make sure they're aware of what's in place. Contract changes. So again, some of the changes that are coming up will require contract changes to be made to templates. Goes hand in hand with your HR collateral, letters, template, handbooks. All of this will need updating as and when these legislative changes come in, but there are changes that have already happened that may impact those as well. So review those. Are they in a good state? Is there anything else that could be changed at the same time? Something you've been putting off, maybe that, but actually you can wrap it all into one. So again, it's a good place to audit what you've got currently. HR software, if you're using an HR system, hopefully the supplier would be able to amend processes or amend parts of the system that would be impacted by these. But obviously, check in with your suppliers. Do they know what's going on? What is their plan for getting the systems up to date? And then finally, obviously, so many changes can't not have an impact. Hopefully you've got strong cultures, you've worked hard for these cultures and you'll be able to maintain them, but it's going to have an impact on your culture. It's going to have an impact on your working practices. There's going to be impacts on, the way you work together and the way you work operationally. And I think it's really important to, take a plan, how is this going to look? What is this going to look like for us? Are we doing the minimum or are we going to enhance? All of these things you need to take into account to then understand actually what's the impact going to be for our business. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Anna to talk you through the worker expectations and balancing all of this along with that.
Thank you very much, Kat. Firstly, can I just say thank you, Kat, because there's a lot of information that you've just given us there. Please, once you've had time to digest and reflect and kind of take all of that in, if there is anything that we can support with, then please do kind of reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help. So let's have a look at the workers' expectations. What I'm going to do first of all is just take you back in time. We had this beautiful thing called COVID, and then 1 year on from that, McKinsey & Company ran a survey in 2021, and this actually told us that post the pandemic, most employees want to work from home 3 days a week. I don't think that will be a surprise to anybody. Then there was also a consideration that 25% of employees would actually switch their employer if they were asked to come back into the office environment full time. And I think with the impact of COVID and all of us working at home and being a little bit more disconnected, mental health became a very strong and one of the top priorities. Fast forward more than 4 years later, the post-pandemic trends first reported remain a really high priority. In 2025, early 2025, there was a What Workers Want survey carried out. And that told us quite a lot of insightful information. 59% of employees without flexible work options are planning to leave within the next 12 months. So it still remains one of the highest kind of, I think, like one of the things that employees are really passionate about. Flexible hours, remote working, extra holiday were top of the list of benefits that employees want and what they valued the most. So you can see where the employee workforce is kind of looking for. And 30% of employees report a decline in their well-being over the past year. And I think in addition to that, 39% of UK employees say that they're likely to look for a new role in the next 12 months, which is quite an interesting statistic with everything going on and obviously the reform coming into place. So what you need to start thinking about is that addressing that imbalance. And I mean, it's fair to say that there is already an increase around flexibility with the flexible working rights changing. And we know that there are going to be more changes to that. But that does mean that you need to think as an organisation around there's more requirements around leave, which overall impacts your business in a number of ways, including staff, the coverage, the productivity, and financially. The employee day one rights is going to have a big impact. It absolutely will make organisations think very differently about hiring. It will make individual organisations think about, how risk averse do they want to be. Organisations are, and we're already seeing it taking a lot longer to make those hiring decisions. If we look at the time to hire on average, it's absolutely increased. We also need to think about D&I and how it impacts us here as well. And a focus on candidates with proven results and experience will often hesitate to make that change. So it's finding that, those great employees in the market. Excuse me. And there's a hesitation overall to hire across a number of organisations. And that's what we're seeing, which is actually resulting in much fewer jobs out there. Kat has already beautifully articulated how the rise in national insurance is going to affect us. But businesses do have lots less money to operate. But at the same time, what they've got to try and do is focus on their current workforce rather than expanding. They need to think about reducing the nervousness that employees have without impacting any of the outcomes as well. Also need to think about pay rises and engagement and how to engage their workforce and that overall employee value proposition without spending, vast amounts of money on it. Workforce morale needs to be kind of looked at. What can you do to kind of lift that morale? And I think this is where you need to really listen to your employees as well come on to. Fewer jobs will impact the ability to job seekers to find a 100% match. Instead, there will be a need for a reskill requirement. And not many organisations will have the budget to do that and invest. So it's how can you upskill your current workforce whilst keeping them in place. So let's just have a look at this from a slightly different angle. Let's just have a look at this now from a business requirement. So we have covered a lot this morning already, and you should by now have an understanding of the sheer number of changes that are coming up. However, once implemented, this then becomes the status quo for companies, potentially levelling the playing field for retaining and attracting staff. So how much further do you really need to go? We've broken it down into 3 areas really, and it's first, next, and then. And what I would say is once we've gone through these, it's about repeat. So it's first, next, then. Reflect, first, next, then, and just keep that repetition going. You absolutely need to keep up to date with all of the latest legislations. If you don't sign up for our insights pack, then please do so, because it's an opportunity that we do some of that legwork for you and we'll actually send out those updates for you. You need to proactively be reviewing and aligning your people policies with the up and coming legislation, especially that legislation that has already taken place. And you need to consider your practical options and solutions for balancing these reforms with all of those business requirements and the operational needs. Once you've done that, you need to think about what next. And that is really about understanding the employees and what they want from the workplace. You need to give them the empowerment and you need to listen to them. So we would strongly advise that you start gathering employee feedback through focus groups, surveys, anything you can do to engage them and listen to them. It really should be employee-led rather than employer-led. Let them have that voice and absolutely let them have that that engagement, that satisfaction, and all of that will build loyalty, because once you can say, well, you said and we've done and we've listened, it goes a long way. And then you just need to think about, assess what factors will have the most effective impact on the employees, and creating a plan to implement. Going beyond basics can increase your attraction and retention model and counteract lower wages to be able to compete for the top talent of those organisations. For example, the flexibility that we've already talked about, the holiday, the benefits that are important to them. Absolutely getting the balance right between them working from home and that office approach, so that you can still get that engagement as well. So before I finish, I'm just going to leave you with a couple of top tips on balancing the legal reforms with the worker expectations. So almost meshing together the last couple of minutes that we've just covered, really. First and foremost, ensure all legal reforms are absolutely dealt with first. This is the key thing to protecting you, your organisation, and obviously your employees, which are your biggest asset. Find out what is important to your employees first before implementing additional changes, so that you absolutely give them that voice of reason. Review what is working on your return of investment for the change, so absolutely keep a track on what you're doing and what difference that makes. Work with your C-suite team early on to validate the cost of the reform, summarising the pros and cons into your business and what impact that's going to have. That's absolutely key. Consider enhancements to your working practices that are minimal cost but absolutely overall improve that employee value proposition. Have a process to identify all of the legal changes. Create a project plan now and allocate resource to allow timely change. It might be, even if you just get everything listed that we've covered today on a project plan, and you start to map out what you can impact now and how you can plan for the future, when it all does suddenly become real, whether that be latter 2025 or autumn 2026, you've already got that plan in place, so you've already built those foundations. And work with key external partners to enhance the capabilities and expertise, so that you're not doing it all alone. So in terms of what's next, really, consider your internal capacity to fulfil on the needs and requirements. If this is limited, as was already said, use the expertise that you've got around you, whether that be co-workers, whether that be peers, or whether it be individuals like ourselves. Plan in advance for the up and coming changes. Again, we don't know the dates, but we know that they're coming. So just start to think about what impact that has. Keep up to date with all the legal changes, as we've said, because we've not yet finished and there are a lot to be finalised. And ensure teams are fully aware and trained on the processes and the policy changes. This is going to be really key for line managers, team leaders, senior leaders, even your C-suite and your exco, so that everybody understands what's going on. We are here and we are more than happy to support and help with HR policy reviews, updates and creations, leadership and employee training, whether that be in bite size or an actual full programme, and actually end-to-end HR administration processes as well. Sam, back to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much, Kat. An awful lot covered there. And just to answer one of the questions off really quickly, yes, we'll be able to share everything that you've seen in this deck today. So imminently, after we finish, you should be getting a recording of this. And if you have any further questions on that, then obviously do not hesitate to shout. But yes, you'll be able to see the full list of considerations that have been discussed. So no problem. So we do have a little bit of time left. Thank you so much for sticking with us. It's quite heavy content, but clearly a priority for many of you, which is great to see. If you do have any other questions, now is a great time to pop them in that Q&A chat. Alternatively, like I say, you've got contact details on the screen there. So feel free to follow up with anybody individually offline once you've had a bit of time to digest and take everything in, because that was an awful lot covered. I can't see anything else coming in just yet, so I will move forwards. So yeah, basically, thank you so much for joining. Just to start to wrap up then, I just wanted to let you know what else is coming for the rest of the year. So in September, I think I mentioned before, we're going to be running a webinar on multi-generational workforces. Another very hot topic that I mentioned came out of our HR and Recruitment Leaders survey that we ran at the back end of 2024. We're going to be talking very much around how you both attract and engage, of course, but also unite that multi-generational workforce. There's something crazy like 5, maybe even some organisations 6 generations working together, which, as we can all imagine, as sort of HR professionals, can cause some issues, but also some great opportunities. So we'll be delving into that a bit more in September. In November, we'll be holding an in-person event to really start to unpick the sort of skills-based hiring and how you really make that a thing and actually make that work in your business, particularly with that backdrop, like Anna and Kat have said, around, you know, cost pressures, reduced hiring. So how do you look at your current workforce and really map out the skills that you've got and then upskill to sort of stay secure and stable for the future? And then finally, in November, we'll be launching our 2026 survey for HR recruitment trends. So there'll also be an event at that point where we really welcome inputs into what your year's looking like next year, and the areas of focus. So you can find out further details of all of those on our website now on our insights page. Like I say, you will also receive a copy of this recording for this webinar imminently, and all of our previous webinars and collateral can also be found at any time on our website. There's a huge amount of resource there. Please feel free to use it. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for your time. We really do hope you found that useful. We will give you the gift now of 5 minutes back in your very busy schedules, and say that we're very much looking forward to seeing you in our webinars next time. Thank you ever so much. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks, everyone.